Hello, I'm Catherine Hammon, Digital Revolution Knowledge Lawyer, and I'm here with Katie Vickery, who is a partner here at Osborne Clarke and heads up our product safety team. We're going to talk about a new code of conduct which has been issued by the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. It came out at the end of last month, and it's a code of practice which concerns the cybersecurity around connected consumer products. What we're going to talk about is the fact that although it's presented as a code of conduct, it may not be as optional as that suggests. But let's start at the beginning. So Katie, it's a code which is around connected consumer devices. Can you explain to us what that is?
Sure. So connected devices also stems around the Internet of Things concept. So lots of products that are connected via the internet to each other to share data and actually to really enhance our life and our well-being, particularly in the consumer space.
And what is it about those products that the government is trying to address with this?
Well, the problem has been that up till now, all of those products, or the security of those products, the emphasis has very much been on the consumer to make sure that they're protected from cybersecurity attacks. And that was felt both by the government and really by people in industry as well, that needed to change. The emphasis or the burden needed to move onto the product manufacturer so that actually security is built into the design of the product rather than the consumer taking on all of the responsibility. So a review has taken place over quite a long period of time and involved a number of stakeholders who've really got involved and tried to implement a code that is pragmatic and sensible for the industry.
Which sounds very sensible because we as consumers are not very good about this. We're not very disciplined about it. So I understand that the code is structured around 13 recommendations. Are there any particular ones amongst those 13 which are of particular importance?
Yes, indeed. So the first three are considered the priority principles or the priority guidelines. And those are the ones that if everybody started following those, then actually that would have the greatest impact upon our connected devices. So the first three guidelines, the first one is about removing default passwords. And that's the classic of a connected device coming out to you with a password of admin or 1234. And research has shown that 15% of consumers never change those. So it's pretty easy for a hacker to get into a product by finding the default password. The second guideline is about implementing a vulnerability disclosure policy. So that is a policy that businesses put into place to be able to monitor and review cybersecurity threats to their products. And one of the main ideas as part of that is that you put on your product a point of contact at the business who would collect data and information about when there has been some kind of cybersecurity threat on the product and can actually share that information with other stakeholders and with other competent authorities. The third priority guideline is about keeping software updated. So this is about making it clear to consumers that the product will have an update if it's capable of doing that for a certain period of time, and importantly, at what point that update will cease. And actually, if it can't be updated, then the consumer needs to be aware of that and understand that as well. So those are the three real priority guidelines that need to be followed.
Thank you. And is there anything else that you think is worth highlighting in the code as well?
Yeah, I mean, the code itself is not very long, so it's a really important read for anybody that's operating in this area. And I mean, that applies to device manufacturers, IoT service providers, and also app developers as well, which I think is important. There is one guideline that applies to retailers, but that's very much around data protection. Of the remaining guidelines that are there are three that I think are also very relevant or would be sensible for businesses to look at, because I think it actually would mean they need to change their user instructions or their user guidelines that come out with the product. And those three are 10, 11 and 12 in the actual code of practice. The first one is about telemetry data. So if the product actually collects telemetry data to send back to the device manufacturer or the IoT service provider, then you should inform consumers that that is what you are doing and ideally get their consent. So I think you need to be telling consumers that that's what you're doing. The second one is about removing personal data. So when a consumer wants to hand on their their device perhaps to somebody else, or they want to dispose of it, how do they actually delete their personal data from that device? Is it clear from the user guide how they go about doing that? And the third point is about making it really easy for consumers to understand how they should set up their devices so that they are secure, and that should be specified in the user guide as well.
Great, thank you. So to go back to how I introduced the topic, a code of practice, that makes it sound as if it's up to businesses whether they follow it or not. But I know that when you've looked at this more closely, it might not be as optional as that sounds.
I think that's right, Catherine. The problem, of course, arises when there is a problem. So if there was a cybersecurity threat on a product and that resulted in there being the possibility of a regulatory breach or even the potential of a product liability action, so a civil claim being made against, say, a device manufacturer, at that point the court would need to consider what standard the device manufacturer should have been securing the device against. You know, there is no, at the moment, harmonised standard. There's certainly plenty of discussion about one coming out, but there is no harmonised standard. So in that vacuum, the court is highly likely to look at this code of practice as setting the standard, as setting the benchmark. So while the code of practice is voluntary, I think if manufacturers in particular are not complying with the code, they will have to explain why not, because that would be the expected market practice. So yes, it's voluntary, but maybe not that voluntary.
Yeah, so it's sort of shifting the bar of what is expected, what's good practice, what's best practice, as
Exactly.
it were. Yeah, great. Thank you. And the other point I've picked up is that this is about connected consumer products, but also about apps.
Absolutely, it applies to apps as well. So mobile app developers should have a good read of the copy of the code as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.